Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Blind Trust. Nathaniel Nate Pearson had always been a man of calculated precision. His imposing 6'3" frame, penetrating gray eyes, and the scar running along his jawline, a souvenir from his military days, gave him an intimidating presence that served him well in both his professional and personal lives. At 42, he had built an empire in private security after serving 8 years as a Navy SEAL. His company, Sentinel Shield, specialized in high-end security solutions for the wealthy and powerful, and business was booming. When he met Vanessa Reynolds 15 years ago, she had been a dazzling presence. Honey blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a laugh that could light up a room. He was immediately captivated by her charm and seemingly genuine interest in his work. Their courtship was swift and passionate, culminating in marriage within a year of their first meeting. Their children, Leo and Chloe, now 12 and 9, were the only people who had ever truly penetrated Nate's hardened exterior. For them, he softened. For them, he would burn the world down if necessary. Nate turned the glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the amber liquid catch the dim light of his study. The room, dark mahogany, leather-bound books, and cutting-edge surveillance monitors hidden behind classic oil paintings, reflected his personality. Traditional on the surface, ruthlessly modern underneath. "Sir, Mrs. Pearson has returned," announced Weston, Nate's head of security and oldest friend from his SEAL days. Now in his late 40s, Weston's salt and pepper hair and steady voice had been constants in Nate's life through the best and worst of times. "Thanks, Weston." Timestamp: 11:42 p.m. That's the third time this week she's returned after 11. Nate nodded, his face betraying nothing. "And the GPS tracker?" "Same location as before. The lakeside apartments on Westbrook Avenue." Nate took a slow sip of his whiskey. "And the children?" "Leo asked when you'd be home again for dinner. Chloe drew you a picture of your fishing trip. I put it on your desk." Nate's eyes found the colorful drawing, stick figures by a blue pond. His heart, so carefully guarded against the world, ached for a moment. "Schedule cleared for tomorrow?" "Yes, sir. As requested." "Good. Let's see what my wife has been up to." Beneath the surface, something dangerous was stirring in Nate Pearson. A side of him that had lain dormant since his military days. A side that his enemies had learned to fear and that his wife had never seen. The next morning, Nate sat across from Vanessa at their expansive kitchen island, watching her carefully apply her makeup in a compact mirror. At 39, Vanessa still maintained the beauty that had first caught his eye, though the innocence he'd once perceived was long gone. "Early meeting again?" he asked casually, noting her designer outfit, far more formal than her job as a part-time event coordinator would require. Yes, she replied absently. "The Harrison wedding is becoming a nightmare. Might be late again tonight." Nate nodded, taking a measured sip of his coffee. "I thought I'd take the kids fishing this weekend. Leo's been asking." Vanessa's eyes flashed momentary panic before she controlled her expression. "Oh, this weekend won't work. My mother needs help with the cottage. I promised I'd take the kids." "Your mother hired a property manager last month," Nate replied evenly. "Remember? You complained about his fees." Vanessa's makeup compact snapped shut. "Well, there are still things she needs help with. You know how she is." "I do," Nate said, his voice taking on a slight edge. "Better than you might think." Something in his tone made Vanessa pause, but she quickly recovered. "I need to run. Can you drop the kids at school? Chloe has ballet after, and Leo has coding club until 5. "Of course," Nate replied. After all, that's what a father does. After Vanessa left, Nate made breakfast for the children, packed their lunches, and drove them to school, all while maintaining perfect composure. Only Weston, watching from the security feeds, could see the dangerous stillness that had settled over his boss, the calm before a devastating storm. Chapter 2. Betrayal Uncovered. For 3 weeks, Nate meticulously gathered intelligence like he was preparing for a military operation. His background made him dangerous not just for his physical capabilities, but for his patience and thoroughness. He had always told his clients that security breaches happened when emotion overrode logic. Now, he applied that same principle to his personal life. Lakeside Apartments, Unit 412, was registered to one Dominic Russo, a name Nate recognized immediately. Dominic was a judge's son who had failed the bar exam 3 times before his father's connections secured him a cushy position at the district attorney's office. He was also the man Vanessa had introduced at last year's charity gala as an old friend from college. Credit card statements revealed regular charges at high-end restaurants and boutique hotels across state lines, always on days when Vanessa claimed to be working late or visiting her sister in Portland. Phone records showed hundreds of texts and calls to a number registered under a fake name, but traced back to Dominic's personal cell. Most damning of all were the recordings. Nate had installed state-of-the-art security throughout their home years ago, ostensibly for protection, but in reality, Nate trusted no one completely. The system captured Vanessa on multiple occasions, speaking in hushed tones about their finances, Nate's schedule, and their future plans. He suspects nothing, Vanessa had whispered during one call. He's too busy with work and the kids to notice anything. Another year, maybe 2, and we'll have everything in place. The real gut punch came when Nate discovered what everything entailed. It wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated plan to systematically destroy him. Nate learned that Dominic wasn't just sleeping with his wife. He was actively using his position in the DA's office to build a case against Nate's company. They were meticulously fabricating evidence of illegal surveillance operations, planning to use it for both criminal charges and a devastating divorce settlement that would strip Nate of his children, his company, and his freedom. The final piece came when Nate hacked into Vanessa's cloud storage and found a folder labeled insurance. Inside were doctored images, manipulated audio files, and a detailed timeline for when to deploy them, all designed to paint Nate as an abusive, controlling husband who used his security expertise to terrorize his family. On a rainy Thursday evening, while Vanessa claimed to be at a client meeting, Nate sat in his study reviewing the evidence one final time. He had enough to confront her, enough to destroy her plans, but something held him back. The same tactical mind that had kept him alive in hostile territory now cautioned patience. There was more to uncover. "How much longer are you going to watch this play out?" Weston asked, standing at the edge of the study with a grim expression. "Until I have everything," Nate replied, his voice cold and detached. "They're not just trying to divorce me, Weston. They want to destroy me, take my children, and put me in prison. What about the kids? They shouldn't be around her if she's planning all this." Nate's jaw tightened. "That's the only reason I haven't confronted her yet. I need to ensure the children are protected." And after that, a dangerous smile, one Weston recognized from their military days, crossed Nate's face. "After that, I'll show Vanessa and her lover what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." The confrontation, when it finally came, was executed with the same precision as all of Nate's operations. He chose a Sunday evening when the children were at a sleepover with friends. He arranged the evidence methodically across his study, printed photos, transcripts of recordings, financial records, all laid out like an intelligence briefing. When Vanessa returned from her charity committee meeting, Nate was waiting in the living room, a glass of her favorite wine poured and waiting. "You're home," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I thought you were taking the Thompson security contract proposal to Denver tonight." "I rescheduled," Nate replied calmly. "I thought we should talk." "I poured your favorite." Wariness flickered across Vanessa's face, but she took the glass and sat across from him. "What did you want to talk about?" "How long have you been sleeping with Dominic Russo?" The question, delivered in the same tone one might ask about the weather, caused Vanessa to choke on her wine. For a moment, panic flashed in her eyes before she composed herself. "What are you talking about?" "Dom is just a friend from college." "Yes, I know. You've mentioned that." Nate's voice remained perfectly level. "What you didn't mention were the hotel rooms in Vermont, the apartment on Westbrook, or the detailed plan to frame me for crimes I didn't commit." Color drained from Vanessa's face. "You've been spying on me?" "No, Vanessa. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." Nate stood up slowly. "My study." Now, in the study, Vanessa's composure crumbled as she faced the mountain of evidence. Her betrayal, laid bare in photographs, transcripts, and financial records, was undeniable. "How did you?" "I've spent my life identifying threats and neutralizing them," Nate cut in. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice when the threat was living in my own home?" Vanessa's shock quickly morphed into calculated desperation. "Nate, this isn't what it looks like. Dom and I, we're just friends. These recordings, They're taken out of context. Stop. The single word, spoken softly but with unmistakable menace, silenced her instantly. You're not just sleeping with him. You're conspiring with him to destroy me and take my children. The affair I could almost understand. People are weak. But trying to frame me? Planning to separate me from Leo and Chloe. His voice took on a deadly edge. That's something I will never forgive. You don't understand. Vanessa pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I feel trapped in this marriage. You control everything. The money, the schedule, even the security cameras watching my every move. The cameras that caught you discussing how to falsify abuse allegations. Nate picked up a transcript. Or the ones that recorded you telling Dominic that once the judge sees these photos, Nate will never see the kids again. Vanessa's expression hardened, her tears drying up instantly. The mask of the victimized wife fell away, revealing the calculating woman beneath. You have no idea what you're up against, she hissed. Dominic's father has judges and police in his pocket. By the time we're done, you'll be lucky to get supervised visitation in a prison meeting room. Nate smiled, a cold, terrifying expression that made Vanessa take an involuntary step back. I was hoping you'd drop the act, he said quietly. It makes what comes next much easier. What are you going to do? Fear crept into her voice. Nothing yet, Nate replied, gathering the evidence into a folder. But you should know something about me, Vanessa. Something you seem to have forgotten. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't lose. Not when it comes to my children. Not ever. You can't win against Dominic's connections, she spat. We'll see. Nate walked to the door. I've taken the liberty of moving your things to the guest room. You'll stay there until I decide what happens next. The children don't need to know anything yet. Vanessa laughed bitterly. You think you can control this situation like you control everything else? You've already lost, Nate. You just don't know it yet. Nate paused at the doorway. One last thing. If you try to take the children or contact Dominic while staying in this house, what happens next will make your worst nightmares seem like sweet dreams. That night, lying awake in his bed, Nate didn't feel the pain or heartbreak one might expect. Instead, a cold, calculating clarity washed over him. In his mind, Vanessa was no longer his wife, but an enemy combatant who had declared war on him and threatened what he loved most. And in war, Nate Pearson had never shown mercy to his enemies. Chapter 3, The First Strike. Vanessa made her move 3 days later, while Nate was at a meeting with a potential client. He received an urgent call from Weston. She's gone. Took a suitcase and the kids. Left a note saying she's filing for emergency custody based on concerns for their safety. Nate's hand tightened around his phone. Track her. Already on it. She disabled the GPS on her phone, but we've got eyes on her car heading east on Highway 16. Let me guess. Toward Judge Russo's district. Exactly. And Nathaniel. She took files from your office. The security footage shows her copying data from your computer onto a drive. Nate ended the call and excused himself from the meeting. By the time he reached his car, he had already called his lawyer, Benjamin Mercer, a sharp-minded former prosecutor who had grown disillusioned with the system and now used his insider knowledge to fight it. They're going to file for emergency custody, Nate explained as he drove, probably claiming I made threats after discovering their affair. Judge? Benjamin asked. Almost certainly Alexander Russo, Dominic's father. Christ. Benjamin's voice was grim. That complicates things. Russo's notorious for rubber-stamping his son's requests. If they get an emergency hearing today, they will. Nate cut in. They've been planning this. Then we need to be ready to counterfile immediately. I'll draft the motions now. Meet me at my office in 30. By late afternoon, Nate's prediction had come true. A sheriff's deputy delivered temporary emergency custody papers granted by Judge Alexander Russo, citing credible threats to the safety and well-being of the minor children, and ordering Nate to stay at least 500 feet from Vanessa and the children pending a formal hearing. Benjamin reviewed the documents with a scowl. They're claiming you threatened her with your military training and surveillance equipment after discovering her alleged affair. The evidence is her testimony and some conveniently timed texts she sent to her mother expressing fear. When's the hearing? Next Friday. 9 days from now. Nate nodded, his mind already formulating plans. That's enough time. Benjamin gave him a concerned look. Enough time for what? Nathaniel, you need to be extremely careful here. One wrong move, and you'll never see your kids again. I'm always careful, Nate replied. But I'm not going to sit back while they use my children as pawns. For the next week, Nate operated with meticulous precision. Publicly, he was the model of compliance, staying away from the family home, communicating only through his lawyer, and following every court order to the letter. Privately, he was orchestrating a counterattack that would destroy Vanessa and Dominic's carefully constructed plan. First, he deployed a team to install additional security around his property, ostensibly for his protection, but strategically positioned to capture any activity around the perimeter. He suspected Vanessa or Dominic might try to plant additional evidence, and he wanted it documented. Next, he focused on Judge Russo. Through discreet channels, Nate uncovered the judge's pattern of favorable rulings for his son's cases, not just custody matters, but criminal cases where Dominic was the prosecutor. Statistical analysis showed that defendants facing Dominic as prosecutor and appearing before Judge Russo had a 94% conviction rate, compared to the district average of 62%. Most importantly, Nate accessed the encrypted backup of all the security footage from his home, footage Vanessa thought she had erased when she stole his files. What she didn't know was that Nate maintained triple redundancy for all security data, with one set stored on a server accessible only to him. The night before the custody hearing, Nate sat in his temporary apartment reviewing the case with Benjamin. The lawyer looked troubled. I've tried every procedural angle to get the case moved to another judge, but Russo's denied all motions. We're stuck with him. Nate nodded calmly. I expected that. Then you should also expect to lose tomorrow, Benjamin said bluntly. Russo won't care about evidence or fairness. This is his son's girlfriend we're talking about. I'm aware. Benjamin studied his client carefully. You don't seem particularly worried. I'm not. Why do I get the feeling you have something planned that you're not telling me about? Nate smiled slightly. Because I always have something planned. Just be prepared to file for an immediate appeal and reconsideration of custody after tomorrow's hearing. You know something I don't, Benjamin pressed. I know many things you don't, Nate replied evenly. That's why you're my lawyer and not my tactical advisor. The hearing went exactly as predicted. Judge Russo barely glanced at the evidence Nate's team presented, dismissed witness testimony about Vanessa's pattern of unexplained absences, and refused to hear expert analysis of the allegedly threatening texts, which showed clear signs of fabrication. Instead, he focused on character testimony from Dominic himself, who spoke at length about Nate's concerning obsession with surveillance and military background that made him unpredictable and dangerous when angered. When the ruling came, it was devastating but expected. Full custody to Vanessa, supervised visitation for Nate pending completion of anger management and parenting classes, and continued restraining order preventing Nate from coming within 500 feet of the family home. As they left the courthouse, Benjamin was fuming. That was a travesty, a complete mockery of justice. Nate, however, remained calm. It was predictable. How can you be so composed? You just lost custody of your children. Temporarily, Nate corrected. File the appeal as we discussed. Before Benjamin could respond, Nate's phone buzzed with a text message from Vanessa. Stay away from your kids. Judge granted full custody. You're done. Nate read the message, his expression unchanged. Then he typed a forward reply. Open your doorbell app. Putting his phone away, he turned to Benjamin. Call Judge Lancaster's office. Tell them we have evidence of judicial misconduct that requires immediate attention. Use the private number I gave you. Benjamin looked confused. Lancaster? She's on the ethics committee, but what evidence are you talking about? It's being delivered to her as we speak. Nate replied, walking toward his car. And make that call I mentioned earlier. It's time. Chapter 4, Checkmate. Vanessa was still smirking at her phone when the doorbell app notification pinged. Probably Nate begging to see the kids, she thought smugly. The victory in court had been even more complete than she and Dominic had anticipated. Judge Russo had been particularly harsh in his assessment of Nate's character, setting the stage for the criminal allegations they planned to bring next. She opened the app casually, expecting to see Nate standing pathetically on her doorstep. Instead, the screen showed nothing but her empty porch. Frowning, she checked the notification again and realized it wasn't a live feed but a saved clip from 2 nights ago. Curious, she played the video. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m. On screen, Vanessa herself appeared, fumbling with her keys as Dominic pressed against her from behind, kissing her neck as they returned from their celebration dinner. "We've got him," Dominic was saying, his words slightly slurred from champagne. "Dad assured me the custody hearing is just a formality. He's already decided." I expected at least a fight," Vanessa replied, turning to kiss him. "Nate usually never gives up so easily." Dominic laughed. "The fabricated texts were a nice touch. Making it look like he threatened you after discovering the affair? Classic. And those doctored photos of bruises? My dad ate it up." "The best part," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the high-end doorbell camera captured perfectly, "is that he thinks this is just about custody. He has no idea we're setting him up for criminal charges next. By the time we're done," Dominic added, "Sentinel Shield will be mine to sell, his assets will fund our new life, and he'll be watching the kids grow up through prison visit glass." They both laughed as they entered the house, the door closing behind them. Vanessa's blood ran cold. With shaking hands, she replayed the video, hoping desperately that she had misheard or misunderstood. But there it was, in crystal clear 4K resolution with perfect audio, her entire plot with Dominic, confessed on her own doorstep. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. "We won. Celebrating tonight." Before she could respond, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Mrs. Pearson?" a formal voice asked when she answered. "This is Clerk Matthews from Judge Lancaster's chambers at the Circuit Court. You've been served with notice for an emergency hearing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. regarding case number FC 29845, custody of minor children Leo and Chloe Pearson. Your presence is mandatory." "What? There must be some mistake," Vanessa stammered. "We just had the hearing today. Judge Russo already ruled." "Yes, ma'am. This is a separate matter before Judge Lancaster regarding evidence of potential judicial misconduct. The hearing has been called at the request of the Judicial Ethics Committee. Again, your presence is mandatory." The call ended, leaving Vanessa staring at her phone in horror. With trembling fingers, she called Dominic. "Did you just get a call about another hearing?" she demanded when he answered. "What? No. I'm heading into a meeting with." "Check your email right now," she snapped. The silence on the other end told her he'd found it. "This is impossible," he finally said. "My father's rulings can't be overturned like this. Someone's messing with us." "The doorbell camera," Vanessa whispered. "Nate has video of us discussing everything. The fake evidence, your father's predetermined ruling, our plans for the criminal charges. Everything." "That's impossible," Dominic insisted. "We swept the house for surveillance before you filed. There was nothing at the front door." "Well, he has it. He just sent it to me. And apparently to Judge Lancaster too." "Calm down," Dominic said, though his own voice had lost its usual confidence. "My father will handle this. Lancaster can't. Your father is named in the ethics complaint." Vanessa nearly screamed. "Did you even read the email? They're investigating him for judicial misconduct in cases involving you." In his temporary apartment, Nate calmly poured himself a glass of whiskey as he watched multiple surveillance feeds on his laptop. One showed Vanessa pacing frantically in the living room of what had been his family home. Another displayed the parking garage where Dominic Russo was practically running to his car, phone pressed to his ear. A third feed showed Judge Alexander Russo receiving papers from a court officer at his chambers, his face growing increasingly pale as he read. Nate's phone rang. "It's done," Benjamin reported. Judge Lancaster was appalled by the video evidence. "She's convened an emergency hearing for tomorrow and has already notified the Judicial Ethics Committee. Russo's been temporarily suspended pending investigation." "And the other matter?" "The DA received the complete file an hour ago. They're treating the conspiracy to commit fraud, evidence tampering, and perjury charges very seriously." Dominic's boss was particularly interested in the statistical analysis of conviction rates in his cases before his father. Nate nodded, satisfied. "Where do we stand on the children?" "Lancaster has ordered them into temporary protective custody with your sister until tomorrow's hearing. The court officer should be picking them up from school now." "Good. Make sure Lisa knows to keep their routine as normal as possible." "Nathaniel," Benjamin said hesitantly, "I've been your lawyer for 8 years. I've never seen you like this. Are you okay?" Nate took a sip of his whiskey, watching as Vanessa collapsed onto the sofa, face in her hands. "I'm fine, Benjamin. This isn't personal. It's your family. How can it not be personal?" The moment they conspired to take my children, Nate replied coldly. They stopped being family and became targets. And I never miss a target. The next day's hearing was brief but consequential. Judge Lancaster, a stern woman with 30 years on the bench and a reputation for absolute integrity, reviewed the evidence with growing disgust. The doorbell camera footage was just the beginning. Nate's team presented forensic analysis of the text messages Vanessa claimed were threatening, showing they had been created after the fact. Phone records revealed coordinated calls between Judge Russo, Dominic, and Vanessa immediately before and after each filing in the case. Most damning were the financial records showing that Dominic had already contacted potential buyers for Sentinel Shield, Nate's company, even though he had no legal right to sell it. This is one of the most egregious abuses of the justice system I have witnessed in my career, Judge Lancaster declared. I am vacating all orders issued by Judge Russo in this matter and referring this case to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Turning to Vanessa, who sat ashen-faced beside her hastily acquired public defender, Judge Lancaster continued, Mrs. Pearson, your actions show a blatant disregard for the well-being of your children, whom you were willing to use as pawns in a scheme to defraud your husband. Pending criminal investigation, I am granting full temporary custody to Nathaniel Pearson. Vanessa started to protest, but her lawyer wisely placed a restraining hand on her arm. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am issuing a restraining order preventing you from approaching within 500 feet of the children or Mr. Pearson's residence until the criminal matters are resolved. As the hearing concluded, Vanessa caught Nate's eye across the courtroom. His expression remained impassive, giving away nothing of the satisfaction he felt at seeing her carefully constructed plan collapse around her. Outside the courthouse, Vanessa rushed toward him, her face contorted with fury and desperation. You set us up, she hissed. That doorbell camera wasn't there when we checked. I installed it the day after you moved out, Nate replied calmly. One of many precautions I took when I realized what you were planning. This isn't over, she threatened. My mother has connections. Dominic's father is being investigated by the state bar, Nate cut in. And Dominic has already been suspended from the DA's office, pending criminal charges. Vanessa's face crumpled. The children will be protected from you, Nate finished. As they should have been all along. You can't do this to me, she whispered. Nate leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. I didn't do this to you, Vanessa. You did it to yourself the moment you decided to use my children as weapons against me. And now you're learning what everyone who's ever crossed me discovers eventually. What's that? She asked, her voice barely audible. I don't fight to win, Nate said simply. I fight to destroy. Chapter 5, The Counterattack. The temporary victory in court was just the beginning of Nate's plan. While Vanessa and Dominic scrambled to defend themselves against potential criminal charges, Nate executed the next phase of his counterattack with methodical precision. First, he dealt with Diana Reynolds, Vanessa's mother. Diana had always disliked Nate, considering him beneath her daughter despite his success. She came from old money and had never approved of Vanessa marrying a man who, in her words, used his hands for a living. What Diana didn't know was that Nate had long ago uncovered her financial secrets, specifically, that her old money had dried up years before Vanessa's marriage, and her lavish lifestyle was maintained through systematic tax fraud and identity theft targeting elderly clients of her charity foundation. Nate arranged a private meeting at her lake house, arriving precisely at the scheduled time. Diana greeted him with barely concealed contempt. I suppose you're here to gloat, she said, reluctantly showing him into her expensively decorated living room. Vanessa told me what you did. Did she tell you what she did? Nate asked mildly, declining the offered seat. Conspiracy, perjury, attempted fraud? Diana waved a dismissive hand. Marriages end, Nathaniel. Perhaps if you'd been more attentive. This isn't about our marriage ending, Nate interrupted. This is about her attempting to take my children through fraud and perjury. Well, what did you expect? That she'd let you walk away with everything? The courts favor mothers, everyone knows that. Nate smiled thinly, which is why she felt compelled to fabricate evidence and conspire with a corrupt judge? Diana's eyes narrowed. What do you want? I assume you didn't come here to debate family law. I want you to understand your position, Nate said, his voice hardening. You've been actively supporting Vanessa and Dominic's conspiracy. Your testimony was scheduled for the next hearing before Judge Russo. Testimony, I know for a fact, would have been perjury. You can't prove. I have the rehearsal on video, Nate cut in. Dominic coaching you on what to say about my threatening behavior that you never witnessed. Diana paled slightly, but maintained her composure. Again, what do you want? I want you to cease all involvement in Vanessa's legal matters. No financial support, no testimony, no strategy sessions. You will not assist her in any way against me or in trying to access the children. Diana laughed bitterly. Or what? You'll sue me too? I have excellent lawyers. No, Nate said calmly. I'll send the evidence of your embezzlement from the Reynolds Foundation to the IRS and FBI. Specifically, the $2.7 million you diverted from donor funds to cover your personal expenses over the past decade. The color drained completely from Diana's face. You're bluffing. Without a word, Nate removed a thumb drive from his pocket and placed it on the glass coffee table between them. Everything is here. Bank transfers, falsified tax documents, the shell company you created to launder donations. My team is very thorough. You bastard, Diana whispered. I'm a bastard who protects what's his, Nate corrected. My children will not be used as pawns by you or your daughter. Do we understand each other? Diana nodded stiffly. Good. Consider the evidence on that drive a copy. The originals remain secure and will be automatically sent to authorities if you disregard our agreement. As Nate turned to leave, Diana called after him. She's still their mother. You can't keep them from her forever. Nate paused at the door. I have no intention of keeping them from her forever, just until justice is served. Next, Nate focused on neutralizing Dominic's influence. Though Judge Russo had been temporarily suspended, the Russo family had deep connections throughout the legal community. Dominic's uncle sat on the state Supreme Court, and his mother chaired the Bar Association's Ethics Committee, a particularly ironic position given the circumstances. Rather than attacking these connections directly, Nate employed a more subtle approach. Using his contacts in private security and digital intelligence, he located every case Dominic had prosecuted where evidence might have been mishandled or where Judge Russo had made questionable rulings. There were dozens. Through anonymous tips to defense attorneys and carefully leaked documents to investigative journalists, Nate ensured that multiple cases were simultaneously brought under review. Within days, 3 major newspapers ran stories about potential systematic judicial misconduct in Judge Russo's courtroom, focusing particularly on cases involving his son as prosecutor. The State Bar Association, unable to ignore the mounting public pressure, announced a comprehensive review of all cases handled by both Russos over the past 5 years. Dominic's uncle recused himself from any involvement, and his mother took a leave of absence from the ethics committee. By the end of the week, Dominic had been formally suspended from the district attorney's office pending investigation, and Judge Russo's temporary suspension had been extended indefinitely. Throughout this systematic dismantling of his enemies, Nate maintained his focus on what mattered most: Leo and Chloe. He worked with child psychologists to help them process the sudden changes in their lives, maintain their routines as much as possible, and never spoke negatively about their mother in their presence. When Leo asked why they couldn't see their mom, Nate explained carefully, "Your mom and I are having some adult problems that need to be sorted out by the courts. Until that happens, the judge thought it would be best for you to stay with me." "Did mom do something bad?" Chloe asked, her 9-year-old intuition picking up more than Nate had expected. "Everyone makes mistakes," Nate answered, choosing his words carefully. "Right now, the important thing is that you know both your mom and I love you very much." It was the one lie he allowed himself to tell. In truth, Nate had come to believe that Vanessa loved the children primarily as extensions of herself, tools to maintain her self-image as a devoted mother while she pursued her own desires. One evening, as he tucked Chloe into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mom getting a divorce?" Nate sat on the edge of her bed. "Yes, sweetheart. We are. Is it because of Mr. Dominic? I saw him kissing Mom once when you were away." Nate's heart tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Partly. But sometimes adults just can't make things work together anymore. Will we have to choose? Between you and Mom?" "No," Nate said firmly. "You don't have to choose. You get to love both of us. Always." After the children were asleep, Nate retreated to his study, where Weston waited with updates. "Dominic's been formally charged," Weston reported. conspiracy to commit fraud, evidence tampering, perjury, and abuse of office. His father is facing judicial misconduct charges and likely disbarment. And Vanessa? Conspiracy and perjury charges have been filed. Her lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. Nate nodded. Has she attempted to contact the children? 3 times. Through her new lawyer, not Dominic. She's requesting supervised visitation. Denied for now, Nate said coldly. The children need stability while they adjust. Weston hesitated before asking, how far do you intend to take this, Nate? As far as necessary. The charges already filed could put both of them away for years. Her mother's staying out of it. The Russo family influence is crumbling. You've won. Nate turned to his oldest friend. This isn't about winning, Weston. This is about justice. They didn't just try to end my marriage or take my money. They tried to take my children and my freedom through fraud and corruption. That deserves more than a tactical defeat. What does it deserve? Nate's eyes hardened. Complete destruction. They need to understand that some lines can never be uncrossed. Chapter 6. The Digital Trap. While the criminal cases against Vanessa and Dominic proceeded through the legal system, Nate implemented the most crucial phase of his plan. He'd won the first battle for custody, but he knew the war wasn't over. Eventually, Vanessa would find a sympathetic judge or manipulate her way back into the children's lives. She might even avoid significant jail time through plea bargains and first-time offender programs. Nate needed something more permanent, evidence so damning that no court would ever grant her unsupervised access to the children again. For this, he turned to a specialized team from his company, ethical hackers who typically tested security systems for vulnerabilities. Their assignment was straightforward but challenging. Gain access to all digital communications between Vanessa and Dominic without detection. I need everything, Nate instructed Troy Winters, his lead digital security specialist. Emails, texts, cloud storage, anything that might contain their ongoing plans or reveal past schemes we haven't uncovered yet. Troy, a lanky 30-something with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and remarkable coding skills, looked uncomfortable. Boss, we're talking about stuff that won't be admissible in court. Unauthorized access is. I'm not looking for court evidence, Nate interrupted. I'm looking for intelligence. Knowledge is leverage, Troy. I need to know what they're planning before they execute it. The team worked methodically, using sophisticated techniques to bypass security on Vanessa and Dominic's devices and accounts. What they discovered exceeded even Nate's expectations. Dominic and Vanessa's conspiracy went far beyond their plot against Nate. They had been planning similar schemes against other wealthy individuals, identifying potential targets, researching their vulnerabilities, and developing tailored approaches to exploit them. Most disturbing were their discussions about the children. In private messages, Vanessa repeatedly referred to Leo and Chloe as necessary collateral damage and useful pawns in their larger plan. In one particularly chilling exchange, she had written to Dominic, "Once we have control of Nate's assets, we can send the kids to boarding school. They're just reminders of him anyway." These revelations hardened Nate's resolve. This wasn't just about his own family anymore. Vanessa and Dominic were predators who had likely victimized others and would continue to do so, if not stopped permanently. Armed with this intelligence, Nate developed what he called the digital trap. It would require perfect timing, technical precision, and a bit of psychological manipulation, all areas where Nate excelled. First, he needed to establish seemingly secure communication channels that Vanessa and Dominic would trust. Through his team, he created vulnerabilities in their existing methods while simultaneously ensuring they discovered what appeared to be secure alternatives, encrypted messaging apps, and email services that, unknown to them, had been compromised from the start. Next, he needed to create circumstances that would push them to use these channels to discuss their ongoing schemes. For this, he leaked information suggesting that the criminal charges against them might be reduced or dismissed due to procedural errors. This false hope, combined with their natural tendency toward conspiracy, would likely prompt them to resume planning. Finally, he needed patience, allowing them enough time and rope to thoroughly incriminate themselves. The trap was set in late October, 3 months after the initial custody battle. By then, both Vanessa and Dominic were out on bail, their criminal cases moving slowly through the system. As Nate had predicted, they began using the compromised, secure channels to discuss their next moves. My lawyer thinks we can get the conspiracy charges reduced. Dominic wrote in what he believed was an encrypted message. If we can paint this as a simple divorce gone wrong rather than a premeditated scheme, we might avoid serious jail time. What about custody? Vanessa replied, I need access to the children to maintain my public image as a devoted mother. Plus, it's our best leverage against Nate. We need to be patient. My father's connections aren't completely destroyed. Judge Harmon owes him favors, and he's presiding over family court next month. If we can get your case before him. The messages continued for weeks, detailing their plans to manipulate the legal system, use the children as bargaining chips, and eventually resume their scheme to seize Nate's assets. They also discussed other potential targets, wealthy individuals going through divorces who might be vulnerable to similar tactics. Nate monitored these exchanges with cold detachment, building a comprehensive file of their continuing criminal conspiracy. When the file reached a critical mass of incriminating evidence, he executed the final phase of his plan. On a crisp November morning, Nate made a phone call to his lawyer. It's time, he said simply. Contact the FBI's white-collar crime division. Use the secure channel we established. Benjamin's response was hesitant. Nathaniel, are you certain? This will destroy them completely. There will be no coming back from this. That's the point, Nate replied. Some people can't be reformed, only removed from the board. And the children? How will they handle seeing their mother arrested again, this time by federal agents? They won't see it, Nate assured him. I've arranged for them to be at my sister's cabin for the weekend. By the time they return, the initial media frenzy will have died down. The call complete, Nate sent a simple text message to Vanessa. We need to talk about the children. Neutrally. Coffee at Riverside Park, 2 p.m. Predictably, Vanessa immediately contacted Dominic through their secure channel. Nate wants to meet. Could be an opportunity to negotiate. Or trap. Advise. Dominic's response came quickly. Meet him. Public place is safe. Record everything. We need leverage. At precisely 2 p.m., Nate sat at an outdoor table at the Riverside Park Cafe, a location he had carefully selected for its open sight lines and proximity to the federal building. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes late, a calculated power move that Nate had anticipated. Nathaniel, she greeted him coolly, sliding into the chair across from him. This is unexpected. Is it? Nate replied, pushing a coffee toward her, her preferred vanilla latte. I thought it was time we discussed arrangements for the children directly, without lawyers. Vanessa's eyes narrowed with suspicion. You've fought against every visitation request I've made. Why the sudden change? The children miss you, Nate said simply. Regardless of what's happened between us, you're their mother. Hope flickered across Vanessa's face, exactly as Nate had intended. He needed her to believe reconciliation was possible, that her plans could still succeed. I've always put them first, she claimed, the lie coming easily to her lips. Everything I did was to secure their future, including sending them to boarding school once you had control of my assets? Nate asked mildly. Vanessa froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. What are you talking about? October 14th, 7:42 p.m., Nate recited from memory. Your message to Dominic. Once we have control of Nate's assets, we can send the kids to boarding school. They're just reminders of him anyway. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You're making that up. I never. November 2nd, 10:15 a.m. Nate continued as if she hadn't spoken. Your message to Dominic about Judge Harmon. If his gambling debts are as bad as you say, he'll rule however we want in exchange for relief. How could you possibly? Vanessa began, then understanding dawned. You hacked our communications. No, Nate corrected. I provided the communications channels you thought were secure. You and Dominic did the rest. Before Vanessa could respond, a team of dark-suited federal agents appeared at the cafe entrance. Nate checked his watch, right on schedule. What's happening? Vanessa demanded, panic rising in her voice as she noticed the agents. Justice, Nate replied simply. Federal agents are currently executing search warrants at your apartment, Dominic's residence, and Judge Russo's home. Similar warrants are being served on your digital accounts. The real ones, not the ones you thought were secure. Vanessa's face contorted with fury and fear. You son of a... Mrs. Pearson? One of the agents had approached their table. I'm Special Agent Morales with the FBI. We need you to come with us. On what charges? She demanded. Conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, attempted extortion, and racketeering under the RICO Act, the agent replied calmly. The full indictment will be provided to you upon arraignment. As the agents led Vanessa away in handcuffs, she turned back to Nate, her face a mask of hatred. This isn't over. Actually, it is, Nate replied, his voice carrying just enough for her to hear. You chose the wrong person to target, Vanessa. I don't fight to win. I fight to end threats permanently. Later that evening, Nate received confirmation that Dominic had also been arrested, along with Judge Russo and 2 other associates involved in their schemes. The federal investigation had expanded beyond his family situation to encompass all of their fraudulent activities, a much wider net than even Nate had anticipated. As he sat in his study reviewing the reports, Weston entered with 2 glasses of whiskey. It's done, Weston said, handing Nate a glass. Federal RICO charges carry 20-year minimums. With the evidence you provided, they'll likely serve at least 15, even with good behavior and plea deals. Nate nodded, taking the glass. And the children's future is secure. Was it worth it? Weston asked quietly. The resources, the time, the emotional toll? Nate considered the question as he swirled the amber liquid in his glass. They threatened everything I care about, Weston. They planned to take my children, destroy my company, and put me in prison, all while smiling to my face. What would you have done? Weston nodded slowly. Probably the same, but with less precision and more violence. A rare smile crossed Nate's face. That's why I plan the operations, and you execute them. They clinked glasses in a silent toast to a mission completed. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The federal indictments against Vanessa, Dominic, and their co-conspirators sent shockwaves through their social and professional circles. What had begun as a contentious divorce and custody battle had evolved into one of the largest fraud and racketeering cases in the state's recent history. As the investigation expanded, federal agents uncovered evidence that the conspiracy extended far beyond Nate's case. Dominic had been using his position in the DA's office to identify vulnerable wealthy individuals going through divorces or legal troubles. Vanessa would then approach them socially, sometimes initiating affairs, while gathering information that could be exploited. Judge Russo would ensure favorable rulings, and their network of corrupt attorneys and financial advisors would help strip the victims of their assets. The morning after the arrests, Nate's phone began ringing incessantly. Diana Reynolds had been trying to reach him since midnight, her calls increasing in frequency and desperation. Finally, at 8 a.m., Nate answered. What did you do? Diana demanded, her voice raw with panic. The FBI took everything, computers, phones, files. They're saying Vanessa could face decades in prison. I didn't do anything, Nate replied calmly. The FBI is investigating a criminal conspiracy. Vanessa's role in that conspiracy is for the courts to determine. This is beyond revenge, Nathaniel. This is destruction. No, Diana. This is justice. Your daughter and her lover didn't just target me. They've been running this scheme against multiple victims. The FBI has identified at least 7 other cases. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a much smaller voice, Diana asked, Did you know? About the others? I suspected, Nate admitted. But the scale surprised even me. The children will remain with me, Nate cut in firmly, where they're safe and loved. They need their grandmother, Diana said, her voice taking on a pleading quality that Nate had never heard before. Perhaps, he conceded. But that depends entirely on your next moves. What do you mean? If you support Vanessa's defense, fund her legal team, or attempt to undermine my custody in any way, you'll never see Leo and Chloe again. If you accept the reality of what your daughter has done and focus on being a positive influence for your grandchildren, we can discuss supervised visitation. You're a heartless bastard, Diana whispered. No, Nate corrected. I'm a father protecting his children from people who see them as pawns, even family members. After ending the call, Nate found Leo standing in the doorway of his study, his 12-year-old face solemn and far too serious for his age. Dad, I saw the news on my phone. They're saying Mom and Mr. Dominic are criminals. Nate motioned for his son to come in and sit. The situation is complicated, Leo. Your mom and Mr. Dominic have been accused of doing some very wrong things. The courts will decide if those accusations are true. Did they really try to take all your money and send us away? Nate hesitated, weighing the value of honesty against protecting his son's relationship with his mother. They made some plans that wouldn't have been good for our family. But what's important now is that you and Chloe are safe, and that you know I'll always protect you. Are we ever going to see Mom again? Yes, Nate replied carefully. But it might be a while, and things will be different. The important thing to remember is that none of this is your fault or Chloe's fault. Leo nodded slowly, processing this information with the same analytical mind that Nate recognized from his own approach to problems. Dad, are you okay? You never seem upset about any of this. The question caught Nate off guard. He'd been so focused on executing his plan and protecting the children that he hadn't considered how his emotional control might appear to them. I am upset, he admitted. But I've learned that letting emotions control your actions rarely leads to good decisions. Sometimes, staying calm is the strongest thing you can do. Like in your SEAL days? Nate smiled slightly. Exactly like that. As the federal case progressed, the full extent of Vanessa and Dominic's crimes became public. The evidence Nate had gathered was just the tip of the iceberg. Federal investigators uncovered offshore accounts containing millions in fraudulently obtained assets, recordings of Judge Russo discussing how to manipulate cases, and documentation of at least a dozen other victims they had targeted or were planning to target. 6 days after the arrests, Nate received an unexpected call from Special Agent Morales. Mr. Pearson, I wanted to update you personally on a development in the case. Dominic Russo has offered to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for sentencing considerations. I'm not surprised, Nate replied. He'll throw anyone under the bus to save himself. Including your ex-wife, Morales confirmed. He's provided detailed statements about her role as the primary instigator in several schemes, including yours. Also not surprising. There's something else, Morales continued. We've uncovered communications indicating that Ms. Pearson had planned to disappear with your children once she gained custody. She had established identities and accounts in Argentina, which has limited extradition. Nate's grip on the phone tightened. When the plan was set for December 20th, right before the holiday school break. After ending the call, Nate sat motionless in his study, processing this new information. Vanessa had planned to take his children not just out of his life, but out of the country, somewhere he might never find them. The thought sent a cold rage through him unlike anything he'd felt before. His contemplation was interrupted by another call, this one from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. You've destroyed everything. Vanessa's voice came through, tight with fury. Are you satisfied now? How are you calling me? Nate asked calmly. You're supposed to be in federal custody. Phone privileges before my bail hearing, she spat. Limited time, so listen carefully. You think you've won, but you haven't. There are things you don't know, people you haven't considered. Like your escape plan to Argentina? Nate asked mildly. With my children? There was a moment of silence, then a bitter laugh. Always one step ahead, aren't you? It doesn't matter. You've turned my life to ash, but I promise you this. When I'm done, you'll understand what true loss feels like. Is that a threat, Vanessa? It's a promise. You may have taken everything from me, but I still have one card to play. The call ended before Nate could respond. Immediately, he contacted Agent Morales to report the call and then summoned Weston to implement enhanced security protocols around the children. She threatened me, Nate explained as Weston organized additional protection details. From federal custody. Empty threats, Weston suggested. She has nothing left. No, Nate disagreed. She thinks she has something. She called it her last card. Any idea what she means? Nate shook his head. Not yet, but I intend to find out. It took 3 days of intensive investigation by Nate's team to uncover Vanessa's final scheme. Hidden in encrypted files on a server registered to one of Diana Reynolds' shell companies, they found detailed documentation of a contract with a man known only as the Specialist, a fixer with a reputation for arranging accidents for the right price. The target, Nathaniel Pearson. The contract included half of Vanessa's hidden assets as payment, approximately $3.2 million, with the remainder to be paid upon successful completion. Most disturbing was the timeline. The operation was already active, with surveillance of Nate and the children documented as recently as 2 days earlier. Nate studied the information with the detached calculation of his military days. This wasn't just a threat to him, but to his children's stability and safety. If Vanessa couldn't have the life she wanted, she was determined that Nate wouldn't have one either, even if it orphaned their children. "We need to take this to the FBI," Weston argued when Nate explained what they'd found. "We will," Nate agreed. "But not yet." "Why the hell not? There's a hitman out there with your name on his list." "Because Vanessa's smart," Nate explained. "The contract will be designed with plausible deniability. We need to catch this specialist in the act and trace it back to her conclusively." "You want to use yourself as bait," Weston realized. "That's insane, even for you." "Not bait," Nate corrected. "A trap, just like before. We let her think she's winning until she's irreversibly committed to a course of action that destroys her." Over the next week, Nate carefully crafted the appearance of vulnerability while simultaneously setting up a sophisticated counter-surveillance operation. He deliberately established predictable patterns, regular runs in the park, consistent school drop-off times for the children, weekly dinners at the same restaurant. All while Weston's team monitored for anyone showing unusual interest in these routines. It didn't take long. On the 5th day, they identified a man photographing Nate during his morning run, a lean, nondescript individual who blended perfectly with the other early morning parkgoers. "Got him," Weston confirmed through Nate's earpiece. "Gray jacket, blue cap, bench by the east entrance. He's been tracking your route with a long-range lens disguised as a water bottle. Maintain distance," Nate instructed. "We need to let him establish a pattern." For 3 more days, they allowed the specialist to observe Nate, mapping his routines and identifying potential ambush points. Only when they were certain he was moving from surveillance to planning did Nate contact Agent Morales. "We've identified an individual conducting surveillance consistent with pre-operational planning for an attack," Nate explained, providing the agent with photographs and tracking data. "We have reason to believe he's been contracted by Vanessa Pearson to arrange my death." Morales was skeptical but professional. "That's an extraordinary claim, Mr. Pearson. What evidence connects this surveillance to your ex-wife?" "Encrypted communications we discovered on servers registered to her mother's companies. I've sent the decryption keys and access information to your office." "If this checks out," Morales said grimly, "it will add significant charges to the case against her." "I'm more concerned with neutralizing the immediate threat," Nate replied. "My children's safety depends on it." The FBI moved with surprising efficiency. Within 12 hours, they had verified Nate's information and developed an operation to capture the specialist, identified as Parker Cole, a former military contractor with suspected ties to multiple unsolved deaths. The plan was simple but effective. Allow Cole to believe he had identified the perfect opportunity to strike, Nate's regular Thursday morning meeting at a downtown cafe, while actually leading him into a carefully orchestrated FBI trap. When Thursday arrived, Nate proceeded with his usual routine, hyper-aware of both Cole's surveillance and the FBI agents positioned throughout the area. As he sat at his regular table, ordering his usual black coffee, he spotted Cole entering the cafe from the corner of his eye. What happened next unfolded with military precision. As Cole approached Nate's table, hand moving toward his jacket pocket, FBI agents converged from all directions. Cole, realizing he'd been compromised, attempted to flee but was quickly subdued. In the aftermath, as agents secured the scene, Morales approached Nate with a grim expression. He had a modified .22 with a silencer, the agent reported, and a backup knife with a neurotoxin coating. This was an amateur hour. Nate nodded, his expression unchanged. "And the connection to Vanessa?" "We found communication devices with encrypted messages that match the protocol in the files you provided. It's a solid link. We're adding conspiracy to commit murder to her charges." "When will she be informed?" "We're conducting the formal interview within the hour. Given the nature of these new charges, her bail hearing has been canceled." Nate checked his watch. "Then she should be calling right about." His phone rang. "Unknown number." "Now," he finished, showing the screen to Agent Morales, who nodded for him to answer with agent's recording. "You set me up again," Vanessa hissed without preamble. "How did you know about Parker?" "I know everything, Vanessa," Nate replied calmly. "I always have. The difference is that now the FBI knows too. Do you understand what you've done?" Her voice had taken on a hysterical edge. "They're talking about 30 years, Nathaniel. 30 years. Actions have consequences," Nate said simply. "You tried to take my children, my freedom, and now my life. What did you expect would happen? I want to see the children, she demanded. Before the trial. I need to explain. No. The single word, delivered without emotion, seemed to break something in Vanessa. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Then I'll make sure they know exactly what kind of monster their father is. Every scheme, every manipulation, every dark thing you did in the military that you think is buried. By the time I'm done, they'll hate you as much as I do. Nate's voice remained steady. You're forgetting something important, Vanessa. What's that? Our children are smart. They'll see the truth for themselves eventually. And the truth is that you were willing to make them orphans to satisfy your vendetta. That's something even your best manipulation can't disguise. After ending the call, Nate sat motionless for several minutes, processing the end of a chapter in his life that had begun with love and ended with attempted murder. Agent Morales, seeming to sense his need for space, had stepped away to coordinate with her team. When Weston approached, he asked the question Nate had been asking himself. Is it finally over? Nate nodded slowly. This part is. Now comes the hardest part, which is helping two children understand why their mother won't be in their lives anymore. Chapter 8. Reconstruction. The trial of Vanessa Pearson and her co-conspirators became a media sensation. The combination of wealthy defendants, complex fraud schemes, and the dramatic assassination plot ensured constant coverage. Through it all, Nate maintained an impenetrable shield around Leo and Chloe, protecting them from reporters and keeping their routines as normal as possible. 6 months after the arrests, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all major counts. Judge Lancaster, who had been assigned to the case after the Russo scandal forced widespread judicial reassignments, delivered sentences that reflected the gravity of the crimes. 28 years for Vanessa, 32 for Dominic, 20 for Judge Russo, and various lesser sentences for other participants. For the specialist, Parker Cole, who agreed to testify against Vanessa regarding the murder plot, the sentence was 15 years in a separate federal facility. As Nate left the courtroom after sentencing, Diana Reynolds approached him, older looking than he remembered, the stress of the past months evident in new lines on her face. Is this what victory looks like for you, Nathaniel? She asked, her voice lacking its usual venom. This isn't victory, Nate replied. This is just consequences. The children are adapting, Nate finished for her. They're resilient. More than either of us expected. Diana nodded slowly. And what about my role in their lives? That depends on you, Nate said. If you're willing to accept that Vanessa created her own downfall and commit to being a positive influence for Leo and Chloe, we can discuss supervised visits. But if you continue blaming me or try to poison them against me, I understand, Diana interrupted. More than you might think. I've had a lot of time to reflect on my own role and how Vanessa turned out. She hesitated. Perhaps I wasn't the best example of integrity. The admission surprised Nate. Are you saying you want to do better with your grandchildren? I'm saying I don't want to lose them too, Diana replied simply. Whatever it takes. Nate studied her carefully, looking for signs of manipulation. Finding none, he nodded. We'll start with monthly visits. Supervised. We'll see how it goes from there. As Diana walked away, Benjamin approached from behind. That was unexpectedly generous of you. The children deserve to know their grandmother, Nate replied. As long as she plays by the rules. And if she doesn't? Nate's expression hardened slightly. Then she'll join her daughter in having no place in their lives. With the legal battles concluded, Nate focused entirely on rebuilding a stable life for Leo and Chloe. He reduced his work hours, delegating more responsibility to his executive team at Sentinel Shield. The company had weathered the storm of publicity surprisingly well. Nate's reputation for integrity actually strengthened by his handling of the crisis. The children's recovery was more complicated. Leo, now 13, had developed a protective shell of stoicism that concerned Nate, too similar to his own emotional walls. Chloe, at 10, alternated between periods of seeming acceptance and sudden emotional outbursts, often triggered by innocuous reminders of her mother. Dr. Eleanor Winters, a child psychologist specializing in trauma, became a regular presence in their lives. Her gentle but firm approach helped both children process their complicated feelings about their mother's betrayal and absence. They're doing remarkably well, considering, Dr. Winters told Nate during one of their monthly consultations. But I'm concerned about Leo's tendency to suppress his emotions. He gets that from me, Nate admitted. It's how I've always handled difficult situations. And is that something you want him to inherit? She asked pointedly. The question forced Nate to confront his own coping mechanisms. For most of his life, emotional detachment had been a strength, allowing him to function in high-stress situations and make clear decisions under pressure. But he recognized now that it had also cost him connections and prevented him from fully processing his own trauma. No, he finally answered. I want him to be stronger than I am. Then he needs to see you processing this too, Dr. Winters suggested. Children learn by example. If they only see you as the invulnerable protector, that's the model they'll follow. That evening, Nate did something he'd rarely done before. During their usual family dinner, he opened up to his children about his own feelings regarding what had happened. I miss the family we used to be, he admitted, watching their surprised expressions. I'm angry about what your mother did, sad about the pain it's caused you both, and sometimes scared that I won't be enough for you on my own. Leo stared at him in shock. But you're never scared of anything. That's not true, Nate said gently. Everyone feels fear, Leo. The difference is in how we handle it. Are you really worried you won't be enough? Chloe asked, her voice small. Nate reached across the table and took her hand. Sometimes, being a parent is the hardest job I've ever had, harder than anything I did in the military. But it's also the most important. So even when I'm worried, I keep trying my best. Like how you tell us to do with math homework, Leo observed with the ghost of a smile. Exactly like that. That conversation marked a turning point in their healing process. By allowing himself to be vulnerable, Nate gave his children permission to express their own complicated emotions about their mother and the upheaval in their lives. Over the following months, they established new traditions and rhythms as a family. Sunday hikes in the mountains, weekly game nights, and cooking lessons where Nate taught them his limited but functional repertoire of meals. Weston became Uncle Wes, a constant presence who supplemented Nate's parenting with his own brand of gruff affection. Almost a year after Vanessa's sentencing, Nate received a letter from her through her prison's mail system. He considered throwing it away unopened, but ultimately decided to read it, wanting to know if it contained any threat he needed to prepare for. The letter was unexpected in its tone. Nathaniel, I understand now that I won't be part of our children's lives. I won't argue against that, given what I did. But I need you to know something. I did love them in my way. Perhaps not as purely or selflessly as they deserved, but it was real nonetheless. I don't expect forgiveness, nor am I asking to communicate with them. I simply want you to know that I relinquish any claim to them. I won't fight you for visitation or contact in the future. They deserve stability, not the confusion of a mother behind bars. This is not generosity on my part. It's the first truly maternal thing I've done, putting their needs above my desires. Vanessa. Nate read the letter several times, trying to determine if it contained manipulation or genuine remorse. Eventually, he decided it didn't matter. The outcome, Vanessa removing herself from the children's lives, was what mattered for their stability and healing. He filed the letter away, neither sharing it with the children nor discussing it with anyone but Dr. Winters, who saw it as a positive development. It gives closure, she explained. For all of you. The children won't have to wonder if she'll suddenly reappear in their lives, and you won't have to prepare for another custody battle when she's eventually released. If she's sincere, Nate qualified. Whether she's sincere or not, she's given you documentation of her intent to step away. That's valuable, regardless of her motives. As the second anniversary of the arrests approached, life had settled into a new normal for the Pearson family. Leo was thriving in high school, his initial emotional withdrawal replaced by a thoughtful confidence that reminded Nate of his own better qualities. Chloe had found her voice through writing, filling journals with stories and observations that revealed an emotional intelligence beyond her years. Nate himself had changed perhaps the most. The ruthless tactician who had systematically destroyed his enemies still existed, but he had learned to balance that side of himself with genuine emotional openness with his children. He would never be demonstrative by nature, but he had learned to express his love and pride in ways they could recognize and trust. The final chapter of this period came unexpectedly, through Leo. One evening, as Nate was helping him with a history project, Leo asked a question that caught him off guard. Dad, do you think people can change? Like, really change who they are? Nate considered the question carefully. I think people can change their behavior and priorities. The core of who they are? That's harder. So Mom will always be what she was. The question revealed what had been weighing on Leo's mind. Your mother made choices based on what she valued most, Nate said carefully. If those values change fundamentally, her choices might too. But that kind of change is rare and requires real commitment. Leo nodded, processing this. I've been thinking about forgiveness. Not for her sake, but for mine. Dr. Winters says holding anger hurts me more than it hurts Mom. Dr. Winters is very wise, Nate replied. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing someone to hurt you again. It means releasing the power that anger has over you. Have you forgiven her? Leo asked directly. Nate paused, wanting to give his son an honest answer. I've let go of the anger, he said finally. It served its purpose in protecting you and Chloe, but I don't need it anymore. I'll never trust her again, and I'll never allow her to hurt either of you. But I don't carry rage against her. That's not exactly forgiveness, Leo observed. No, Nate agreed. It's not, but it's the closest I can get. Some betrayals cut too deep for complete forgiveness. Leo nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. It's like in your Navy SEAL stories. You can stop fighting an enemy without ever becoming their friend. Nate smiled at his son's insight. That's exactly right. As Leo returned to his project, Nate realized that his children had developed a resilience and wisdom from their ordeal that would serve them throughout their lives. They had witnessed betrayal from someone who should have protected them, but they had also seen unwavering loyalty and love from their father. In the end, that would be Nate's legacy, not the tactical brilliance with which he had destroyed his enemies, but the steadfast protection he had provided for the two people who mattered most. Chapter 9. Unforgivable. 5 years after Vanessa's sentencing, on a clear autumn morning, Nate sat in his study reviewing quarterly reports from Sentinel Shield. The company had expanded considerably, now employing over 300 people and providing security solutions to clients worldwide. His role had evolved from hands-on operator to strategic director, allowing him the flexibility to prioritize his family. Leo, now 18, was preparing for college, accepted early to MIT for computer science, a field where his analytical mind and attention to detail served him well. Chloe, 15, was developing into a formidable young woman with her father's intensity and a creative talent that was entirely her own. The sound of Weston clearing his throat from the doorway pulled Nate from his review. You have a visitor, Weston said, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. Diana Reynolds. Nate raised an eyebrow. Diana's monthly visits with the children had evolved over time into a genuinely positive relationship. She had proven herself trustworthy, never attempting to undermine Nate or romanticize Vanessa's actions to the children. But she never came unannounced. Send her in, Nate directed, closing his laptop. Diana entered looking agitated, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. At 67, she carried herself with the same aristocratic bearing, but the years and stress had softened some of her harder edges. Nathaniel, she greeted him tensely. Diana, this is unexpected. She took a seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. I've received a letter from Vanessa. She's being considered for early release next year. Good behavior, participation in rehabilitation programs, overcrowding, the usual reasons. Nate absorbed this information without visible reaction. He had known this day would come eventually, though he hadn't expected it so soon. Why are you telling me this? He asked carefully. Diana hesitated, then looked him directly in the eyes. Because she wants to see the children when she gets out. She says she's changed, that therapy has helped her understand her actions and take responsibility for them. That's not happening, Nate said flatly. I agree, Diana replied, surprising him. That's why I'm here. Nate studied her with new interest. You don't think she should see them? No, I don't. Diana's hands twisted in her lap. It's taken years for Leo and Chloe to heal, to build their lives without constantly looking over their shoulders. Vanessa's return would only disrupt that stability. I'm surprised to hear you say that. Diana's expression hardened. I've spent 5 years trying to make amends for my role and how Vanessa turned out, the entitlement I encouraged, the manipulative behavior I modeled. I won't let her damage another generation. What exactly are you proposing? Nate asked. I wanted to warn you so you can prepare, legally and otherwise. She reached into her handbag and removed a sealed envelope. This contains a sworn affidavit from me detailing my knowledge of Vanessa's true character and why I believe contact with the children would be harmful. Use it if you need to. Nate took the envelope, genuinely surprised by this turn of events. Thank you, Diana. She stood to leave, then paused. There's one more thing. In her letter, Vanessa mentioned that she's been in contact with Dominic again. He's up for parole review next year as well. The information sent a cold wave of alertness through Nate. If Vanessa and Dominic were communicating and potentially being released around the same time, it represented a potential threat he needed to address. After Diana left, Nate immediately contacted Benjamin, who had remained his lawyer and become a trusted friend over the years. I need everything you can get on Vanessa's potential early release, he instructed, and Dominic Russo's as well. If they're communicating, I want to know how and what they're planning. You think they're conspiring again? Benjamin asked, concern evident in his voice. I think Vanessa doesn't change her nature, Nate replied, and neither does Dominic. We need to be prepared. Over the next month, Nate gathered intelligence with the same methodical thoroughness that had characterized his original counterattack. Through legal channels, prison informants, and discreet surveillance, he confirmed that Vanessa and Dominic had indeed been communicating through an approved correspondence program for the past 18 months. Most of their exchanges appeared innocuous, discussions of prison life, rehabilitation programs, and philosophical musings about second chances. But interspersed within these seemingly innocent letters were coded references that Nate's analysts identified as potential plans for after their release. Most concerning was a recurring phrase, reclaiming what's rightfully ours. Nate shared none of this with the children. Leo was focused on his upcoming graduation and college preparations, while Chloe was immersed in her high school's theater production. He saw no reason to disrupt their lives with threats that he fully intended to neutralize before they ever materialized. Instead, he developed a three-pronged strategy: legal, personal, and tactical. Legally, he worked with Benjamin to prepare comprehensive documentation of Vanessa's crimes, their impact on the children, and expert testimony on why renewed contact would be harmful. They filed preemptive motions that would trigger automatically if Vanessa attempted to seek visitation or custody modifications. Personally, he had carefully documented conversations with both children about their feelings regarding potential future contact with their mother. Leo, approaching adulthood, was clear that he had no interest in a relationship with Vanessa. She's biologically my mother, he stated, but she forfeited being my mom when she tried to use us as pawns. Chloe was more emotionally conflicted but equally determined. I need to focus on my future, not reopen old wounds. Tactically, Nate established discreet surveillance protocols that would activate upon Vanessa or Dominic's release, ensuring early warning of any approach toward the children or attempts to contact them outside legal channels. 2 months before Vanessa's parole hearing, Nate received an unexpected letter. Unlike her previous communication, which had come through the prison system, this one arrived at his office in an unmarked envelope with no return address. The letter inside was brief but ominous. Nathaniel, by now you know I'm eligible for early release. What you may not realize is that I have no intention of fighting you for the children. They're adults, or nearly so. They can decide for themselves if they want a relationship with me. What I do intend to reclaim is my dignity and my future. The company and assets you built during our marriage were partially mine by right, regardless of my actions afterward. Dominic and I have spent years developing a legal strategy to recover what should have been part of our divorce settlement. We don't need to be enemies forever. A reasonable settlement could avoid further pain for everyone involved. Think of it as the price of permanent peace. Consider this carefully before my release. Vanessa. Nate read the letter twice, then contacted Benjamin immediately. Is there any legal merit to her claims? He asked after sharing the contents. None whatsoever, Benjamin assured him. Her criminal convictions for conspiracy and fraud related to company assets completely invalidate any claim she might have had in a normal divorce. But that doesn't mean she can't file nuisance lawsuits and create headaches. So it's extortion, Nate concluded. Pay her off or face legal harassment. Essentially, yes. And unfortunately, clever extortion. She's careful not to explicitly threaten anything illegal, just legal strategies that would be painful. How would you advise handling this? Benjamin sighed. If it were anyone else, I'd say consider a small settlement to avoid the hassle. But given your history with Vanessa and her demonstrated capacity for escalation, Giving in would just be the first step, Nate finished. She'd keep coming back for more. Exactly. Nate made his decision immediately. Draft a response. Make it clear that any legal action against me or my company will be met with maximum counteraction, including criminal charges for extortion, if applicable. No settlement, no negotiation. You realize this means war, Benjamin cautioned. No, Nate corrected. This means finishing what should have ended 5 years ago. In the weeks that followed, Nate prepared for Vanessa's potential release with the same thoroughness that had characterized his previous operations. He strengthened his company's legal position, documented every communication that could be construed as extortion, and quietly arranged for enhanced security around his family. When Vanessa's parole hearing arrived, Nate attended personally, a silent presence at the back of the room. She had aged in prison, the stress and confinement erasing much of the beauty that had once captivated him. When she spoke to the parole board about her rehabilitation and remorse, her performance was convincing. If Nate hadn't known her so well, he might have believed it himself. The board granted her parole with standard restrictions, regular check-ins, employment requirements, prohibitions against contact with co-conspirators, including Dominic Russo, who remained incarcerated after being denied early release. As Vanessa left the hearing room, she locked eyes with Nate briefly. In that moment, all pretense of reformation vanished, replaced by the cold calculation he recognized from their final confrontations years ago. It confirmed what he already knew. The threat remained active. 3 weeks after her release, Vanessa made her first move, a formal legal petition seeking a portion of Sentinel Shield's value based on contributions to its early development during marriage. The filing, as Nate had expected, was legally baseless but carefully crafted to require extensive response and create negative publicity. Rather than merely defending against the suit, Nate executed the counteroffensive he had prepared. His legal team filed immediate sanctions for frivolous litigation, supported by the letter Vanessa had sent, which judges agreed constituted implicit extortion. Simultaneously, they notified her parole officer of potential violations based on the letter's reference to ongoing communication with Dominic Russo. The result was swift and decisive. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. Vanessa was ordered to pay substantial legal fees, and her parole conditions were tightened to include prohibitions against any further legal action against Nate or his companies without prior review by the parole board. Most devastating for Vanessa was the court's ruling that her actions constituted a continuation of the pattern of behavior that had led to her original conviction, triggering a clause in her parole that extended her supervision period from 3 years to 5. Vanessa's response came a week later. Another unmarked envelope, but this time containing only a single sentence. You've made your choice. Now watch what happens. The threat was vague but unmistakable. Nate immediately increased security around both children, particularly Leo, who was preparing to leave for college. He also notified Vanessa's parole officer of the implied threat, resulting in a formal warning that any confirmed harassment would result in her return to prison. For several weeks, nothing happened. The silence was more concerning to Nate than immediate action would have been. It suggested planning, patience, qualities that made Vanessa dangerous. The attack, when it came, targeted neither Nate nor the children directly. Instead, a series of anonymous posts appeared on industry forums and social media, alleging that Sentinel Shield used illegal surveillance techniques and violated client privacy. The post contained just enough insider terminology and specific references to seem credible to those unfamiliar with the company's actual operations. Concurrently, several of Nate's largest clients received anonymous emails containing documents that appeared to show unauthorized access to sensitive information. Though clearly fabricated, the allegations required time and resources to disprove, creating exactly the kind of business disruption Vanessa had intended. Nate recognized the pattern immediately. It was similar to the strategy Vanessa and Dominic had planned to use against him years earlier, creating doubt and suspicion through carefully crafted misinformation. The difference was that now he was prepared. Rather than merely defending against the allegations, Nate's team traced the posts and emails to their sources, a complex trail that eventually led back to a public library computer regularly used by Vanessa and a burner phone purchased with cash near her approved residence. The evidence wasn't conclusive enough for criminal charges, but it was sufficient for a parole violation hearing. Combined with the threatening letter and pattern of behavior, it resulted in the decision Nate had anticipated. Vanessa's parole was revoked, and she was returned to prison to serve the remainder of her original sentence. As she was led from the hearing room, Vanessa locked eyes with Nate once more. This time, there was no calculation in her gaze, only pure hatred. "This will never end," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "Not until one of us is dead." Nate met her gaze steadily. "Then you'll be serving your full sentence," he replied evenly. "Because I don't intend to die anytime soon." In the aftermath, Nate made a decision he had been considering for some time. He gathered Leo and Chloe in his study, where the family held its most important conversations. "I want to discuss your mother," he began, noting how both teenagers tensed at the mention. "You know she was released briefly and has now been returned to prison for violating her parole." They nodded, having been informed of the basic facts without alarming details. "What you don't know is that she attempted to extort money from me and, when that failed, tried to damage the company." "Why are you telling us this now?" Leo asked, his expression guarded. "Because you're both old enough to understand the full truth, and because I believe in preparing for all possibilities." Nate took a breath. "Your mother made a threat against my life before returning to prison. I don't believe she can act on it while incarcerated, but eventually, she will be released again." Chloe's eyes widened. "She threatened to kill you?" "Her own children's father. She doesn't see me as your father anymore," Nate explained gently. "In her mind, I'm the enemy who destroyed her life and took everything from her." "But she destroyed her own life," Leo objected. "She committed crimes. She tried to frame you. She even hired someone to kill you the first time." "That's the rational perspective," Nate agreed. "But your mother doesn't see it that way. She believes she's entitled to the life she wanted, regardless of the means used to obtain it." "What does this mean for us?" Chloe asked quietly. "Are we in danger too?" "No," Nate assured her firmly. "I've taken every precaution to ensure your safety. But I wanted you both to understand why certain security measures exist in our lives, and why they'll continue even as you become adults. Like the tracking apps on our phones," Leo realized, "and the background checks on our friends." Nate nodded. "Precisely. These aren't because I don't trust you, but because there are genuine threats I need to monitor." "Do you think she'll ever truly change?" Chloe asked, the question weighted with years of complex emotions. Nate considered his answer carefully. "I believe people can change their behavior when the cost of continuing becomes too high. But changing one's fundamental nature, the core values and beliefs that drive decisions, that's much rarer." "So you don't think she'll ever stop?" Leo concluded. "I think she'll stop when she no longer has the means or opportunity to continue," Nate replied honestly. "And I intend to ensure that remains the case." As his children absorbed this sobering reality, Nate saw something resolve in both their expressions, a kind of final acceptance of the truth about their mother and the permanent vigilance their family would require. "We need to look out for each other," Leo said finally. "All of us, even when I'm at college." "Especially then," Nate agreed. "But don't let this overshadow your lives. The best defense against people like your mother is living well and freely while remaining vigilant." As they left his study, Nate reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the devastating betrayal 5 years earlier to the strong, resilient family they had become, they had weathered storms that would have destroyed many others. The threat Vanessa represented would likely never fully disappear. Her hatred and sense of entitlement ran too deep for genuine reformation. But Nate had long ago accepted this reality and built his life accordingly, balancing necessary vigilance with the joy and purpose his children brought him. In the end, Vanessa had failed in her most fundamental goal, destroying Nate Pearson. Instead, her actions had forged him into a more complete person, still the ruthless tactician when necessary, but also a father capable of vulnerability and emotional connection with his children. Some betrayals were unforgivable. Some enemies would never cease their efforts to harm you. Nate understood this truth from both his military days and his personal life. The key wasn't hoping for reconciliation with such adversaries, but ensuring they lacked the power to cause further damage while focusing on protecting what truly mattered. For Nathaniel Pearson, what mattered was sitting around the dinner table that evening, his son and daughter, whole and healing despite everything they had endured. That was his true victory, more meaningful than any tactical triumph over Vanessa could ever be. The text message that had started this journey: "Stay away from your kids. Judge granted full custody. You're done," had been intended as Vanessa's declaration of victory. Instead, it had become the catalyst for her complete destruction and Nate's most important realization: that protecting his children required not just tactical brilliance, but emotional honesty. The doorbell camera that captured her conspiracy had been just the beginning. The true power had come from Nate's unwavering commitment to justice and protection, no matter the cost. In the silent sanctuary of his study that night, after the children had gone to bed, Nate raised a glass of whiskey in a solitary toast, not to victory over Vanessa, but to the family that had emerged stronger from the crucible she had created. Some fires, after all, forge stronger bonds than they destroy.